Good evening, and welcome to the den of the orator. As you can see, most sensible people are abed. So I think it's time to pull up your chair and settle in, because tonight, I have another tale to tell. But before we begin, if you find yourself enjoying my normal content, first-hand true accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, that allow the spirits to guide your planchette, to both the like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, which right now is every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Second, if you or anybody you know has a story that you think would fit well on my channel, just reach out to me on any of my social media, and we'll find a time to get together, collect your story, and potentially one day feature it here on The Orator. And lastly, if you would like to support the channel, please check out my merch and my Patreon as ways to potentially support my channel as we continue to move forward. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get on to today's story. It is another tale from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Tonight's tale is a story of the Big Toe. Now, Brian was only 8 years old, and this is in the 1800s in England. And he is just from a pretty poor family. I mean, his mom and dad, they were bean farmers, and so, they just never made a ton of money, and he was kind of generationally poor, and he was just like, he belonged to the family that it seemed like everybody else in town sort of made fun of. And so Brian, as soon as he was of age to start going to school, kids were picking on him, and he just had kind of a miserable, lonely life. He was an only kid. And, while his mom and dad didn't make very much money because they farmed primarily beans, they always ate. They never starved or anything like that. But outside of that, life was just miserable. Broken home, no friends, no siblings, no money. It was just a very difficult life for Brian all the way up until 8 years old. And he, of course, commuted to school. He'd walk back and forth. And back in the 1800s, it just wasn't seen as very strange that an 8-year-old would walk himself to and from school. And so it is just a very typical day for Brian. He has finished school. It was, of course, a rough day. He got made fun of, and all of his clothes are torn and tattered, and he's just feeling very down, very dejected, very downtrodden on his lonely walk home. And of course, he doesn't take the normal roads like everybody else. He tries to take this. There are some trails that kind of go through the woods. Not only is it a shortcut, but really for Brian, it's just a way for him to get away from all of the other kids. And so he's by himself, and he's walking through the woods. And as he's on this trail, he sort of spots something he's never seen before. Now, he's taken this path back and forth to school pretty much every single day. He's super familiar with it. And so to see something out in the woods that he's unfamiliar with is just strange. I mean, these are his woods. This is his trail. Nobody else really goes on this. And so he's looking out into the woods, and he sees what looks like, it's almost like this patch of moss or grass, something that looks just different. It's differently colored than the surrounding foliage, and he can tell it looks like something is growing there, something kind of big. And so he pauses for just a second before deciding to step off this trail and go and check this out, because Brian just doesn't have that much in his life that's exciting or interesting or that changes ever. And so even something this small is interesting to him. And so he steps off the trail and he heads over. And as he enters this sort of, it almost looks like a clearing. It's like all around him is the forest and the trees, and there's one set of ground that almost, it would look sacred, except for it's kind of funky. Everything around it is kind of brown. It's not necessarily deadened, but it just seems sort of dark and strange. And if the surrounding foliage was not enough to convince him that something strange is going on here, what is growing in the middle of this sort of circle certainly should have been an indicator, because what's growing out of the ground is one large, what appears to be a toe. It looks like it maybe would come from a human foot, except it's gigantic. And so, Brian, he's taking a look at this, and he's kind of digging around under the earth to see, like, is this a prank of some kind? What is this? What is going on? Is this really what I'm seeing? And as he's sort of digging around, he sort of sees almost like a root system growing into the ground. And so he's kind of feeling around on this toe, and it feels fleshy. And his first thought might be a little bit strange to a lot of people, but you have to remember, they're really, really poor, Brian's family. And so the first thing that he thinks is that if he can cut this toe free, they're going to have meat for dinner for the first time in like weeks. And so he has this little kind of like a jagged pocket knife, and he goes to work and he sort of saws this thing off. And it's kind of hard and almost wooden, but eventually he does separate what appears to be this toe from the root system underneath. And as he separates it, he all of a sudden hears this scream. And it sort of echoes around the forest around him. And then it's like he almost hears what sounds like something large, big, scampering, running away through the woods, almost like it's crying as it's screaming and running away. And then all of a sudden, it's deadly silent in the forest. And he's sitting here with this separated toe, and it's kind of leaking this, I don't know, juice or dark liquid onto the ground, but he has secured it. So he, kind of pockets his knife, and he takes this toe home. And he comes inside, and he tells his mom and dad kind of what he experienced and the ground it came from. And while they're a little bit weirded out, his mom's like, all right, she takes a look at it, and it does look to be like a big hunk of meat. And so she carves it up into 3 big chunks, and she sets it into the soup that she's been boiling all day. Remember, they're bean farmers, and so, a lot of what they have is a lot of bean soups and stews and things like that. She's been cooking these beans all day to make sure that they are soft enough for dinner. And so now she adds this toe meat to this soup or stew. And for the next couple of hours, the whole family is just really excited. The smells that are coming out of this pot are just so delicious. I mean, this is a huge hunk of meat, bigger than they've had in as long as Brian can remember. And then, of course, dinner time comes, and his mom has gotten this big bread she's baked for the occasion, and she carves up the loaf, and she serves this big, meaty, soupy stew that they haven't had in forever. And they have the best meal that Brian can remember eating in months, maybe even years. And they all have just such a great evening. It's so relaxing, and they're full for the first time in a long time. And then Brian, at some point, retires to his room with a full belly, and he very easily drifts off to sleep. And he sleeps through the early part of the evening and into night, but somewhere around about 2, 3 in the morning, right around the witching hour, he's woken. And at first he doesn't know what's going on. He realizes he doesn't have to go to the bathroom. He doesn't feel anxious about anything. There doesn't seem to be any loud noises. And so Brian is wondering, what has roused him in the middle of the night from his slumber, and he's just about to fall back asleep when he hears something. And he can't tell exactly where it's coming from. It almost sounds like it's coming from everywhere around him. And it's coming from clearly outside. It's not in the house, but he can hear it. And it is distinct. And it's this deep, kind of gravelly, earthy voice. And he can hear it sort of seep through the walls.
Where is my toe?
And it's like immediately, Brian, his body breaks out into cold sweats. He has chills. He feels tingling up and down his arm and his spine. He can feel the cold sweat already start to drip down his back, because when he took that toe, he could tell the ground, like I said, it was almost sacred or disturbed. He should not have taken it. There was a part of him that knew that it was a bad idea, but it was just his family was hungry, and he knew he would almost be like the hero of his family to bring this food, this meat back, this fresh meat. And so he's, it's like he knows in this moment he's made a mistake, that what he did was wrong. And now whatever this thing was that he took this toe from, it's back. He knows it immediately. And so right away, Brian, he's only 8 years old. The terror is so abject, so real, so infiltrating. It fills the marrow of his bones because he knows that what he took this from, it's not human. It's supernatural in scope. He should not have touched this. And so all he does is he hides under his sheets, under his blanket. He's terrified by this concept of this thing and knowing where he is. He just can sense that it will know where he is. And so as he's hiding under this blanket, listening, it's almost like he hears downstairs the door open. And he can hear the slap of these feet, these bare feet, on the floor downstairs. And he hears it.
Where is my toe?
As it sort of searches around downstairs. And Brian's thinking like, my mom ate your toe, my dad ate your toe, it can't be just me, it can't look for just me. But he somehow also simultaneously knows that he is the one who's taken it. And so he's trying to hide, and he's just thinking, if I can't see it, maybe it can't see me. But as he's thinking, as he can hear these footsteps as they start slapping up the stairs, closer and closer to his room. He can hear these footprints getting closer and closer. The slapping footfalls harder, louder as it gets closer to his room. And then he hears the voice again thundering right outside of his door.
Where is my toe?
And Brian, he can't move. He can't breathe. His breath is caught in his chest. His body is shaking as he hides, as his eyes close, as hard as he can close them. And then the door creaks open. And he can slowly hear the feet coming closer. He can tell how heavy they are, how large this creature must be. He can feel it lean in, breathing into his ear. The next morning, when Brian's parents awoke, there was no sign of their son. Where his room was undisturbed. It looked like perhaps he had just gotten up in the middle of the night, wandered out of his bed. For months, his parents searched, the local police, the village, and never was a trace found again. And his parents, they went out into the woods on his trail to find this sacred place where he found this toe, because it was the only lead that they could think of. It was the only thing that was strange that had happened in the last couple days. And while they walked up and down that trail and they searched every inch of that forest, they never found the sacred circle. They never found the place where grew the big toe. And so that's going to do it for today's story. If you found yourself enjoying this story or any of my normal content, usually first-hand true accounts of the supernatural, the paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then make sure to allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, which right now is every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Second, as I mentioned, my usual content is first-hand true accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you're anybody you know has a story that you think would fit well on my channel, just reach out to me on any of my social media and we'll find a time to get together, collect your story, and potentially one day feature it here on The Orator. And lastly, if you do like my content and you'd like to support the channel, please check out my merch where you can get some really cool shirts and mugs and other things. Also check out my Patreon where I can put out some extra stuff every single month, and you can support the channel that way. And so, until next time, where most sensible people will be abed, you may pull up your chair and settle in, and I will have another tale to tell.